Mr. Tung, can you list for us the things that you believe are, quote, simply women are, quote, simply better at than men?
Senator, again, the comments you're referencing and captured by a Yale Daily News reporter were captured over 20 years ago when I was an undergraduate.
Do you believe that Loving versus Virginia, which affirmed an interracial couple's right to marry, was that wrongly decided?
Senator, my wife and I are an interracial couple, and so if that case were wrongly decided, I would be in big trouble.
To shut up in a second. I just want to be sure I understand. Back at Yale, you said there are some things that women are better at, right?
Yes, Senator.
Not worse.
That's right.
Better.
Yes, Senator.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Colleagues, I want to follow up on an issue and comments that were raised by Ranking Member Durbin, because I've had the opportunity to take a look at Mr. Tung's background. We've had an opportunity to have a conversation via Zoom. And I know he has strong views about how other people's families should function and what women should be allowed and not allowed to do. I'll quote from Mr. Tung's previous writings. He has criticized the so-called, quote, welfare state for the, quote, disillusion of the family, end quote. He has said he, quote, believes in emphasizing family and what it means for a woman to be a good wife and partner, end quote. He has said, and I find this reprehensible, that he, quote, believes in gender roles and that women are simply better than men at some things. When these radical feminists try to blur gender roles, they undermine institutions like marriage, institutions which hold society together, end quote. Mr. Tung, can you list for us the things that you believe are, quote, simply women are, quote, simply better at than men?
Senator, again, the comments you're referencing and captured by a Yale Daily News reporter were captured over 20 years ago when I was an undergraduate in college.
Yes, I understand that, but that was 2006, not 1956. Even the year 2006, I don't think the country's mood, let alone the law, was what you're suggesting here.
Senator, my wife is sitting behind me, and I can tell you that she is better at many things, and not just some things, than I am. She worked on the Hill, she worked in the White House, and she worked for a Fortune 1 company.
So then do you still believe that women should stay home and not go out into the workplace?
Senator, the suggestion that I think women should not be provided with the same professional opportunities as men is inaccurate.
So at what point in the last 20 years, not 50 or 60, just in the last 20 years, did your mind change on this?
Senator, my views on policy matters and sociological matters that you're referencing, again, are the subject of wide debate. And for that reason, as a nominee sitting here today before the committee, I cannot
But there's a couple of reasons that bring
candidates.
this up, and there are some other issues I want to get to. But first of all, I think for any person to come into a courtroom, they deserve to know that they're going to be given a fair trial, fair consideration in a proceeding. So given your very public past comments, not long ago history, relatively recent history, how should a woman be entering into your courtroom thinking they're going to get a fair shake if you won't even tell us when and how your mind was changed on this? And you've now referenced twice this concern about live issues. So what item is working its way through the judiciary that may well appear on the Ninth Circuit for you to consider and rule on?
Senator, every litigant who would come before my court, should I be so lucky to be confirmed as a judge, would be treated with, man or woman, would be treated with equality, dignity, and respect.
Well, that's why we're asking this question. But what are the live issues that you're referencing that keep you from answering Senator Durbin's questions and my questions?
Senator, matters of policy and of sociology.
What is the live issue you're referencing that's keeping you from answering Senator Durbin's question and my question?
Senator, I apologize. I'm not understanding the question.
Well, you are hiding behind a, quote, live issue concern for not answering Senator Durbin's question or my question.
Senator, the live issues that you're referencing are based on certain comments.
I want to know what you're
made.
referencing.
Senator, the live issues that I'm referencing are matters of policy and sociology that impinge on gender-related issues.
So anything that could be a topic of conversation anywhere in the country at any time will keep you from answering our specific questions. Let me move on to one more item then. Because you've been a prolific writer, not just on your views about women, but on views on American workers. My colleague, Senator Schiff, raised an incident, a Labor Day protest that you were one of the leaders of you were president at the time for the Committee for Freedom. The protest in question, protesters there had a message, quote, "End mandatory maternity leave. It hurts women." Others held signs that said, "Workers of the world, get back to work." And Mr. Tung specifically wanted to tell the Yale campus that unionized labor hurts consumers. Mr. Tung, is this you holding a sign that says union no?
Senator, that is me from over 20 years ago when I was in college exercising my First Amendment rights.
Absolutely, and I defend your First Amendment rights, but I also defend labor rights and labor protections in this country. So just as I asked with women a few minutes ago, if a labor issue is before you, how can working men and women come into your courtroom and feel like they're going to get a fair shake given your clearly strong views, not in the long ago past, but in the relatively recent past?
Senator, when one puts on the robe, the person's role changes qualitatively. And I can assure this committee, and I commit to this committee, that if I were fortunate to be confirmed as a judge, I will evaluate each argument advanced by the parties respectfully, carefully, and with the scrutiny that it deserves.
Do you recant this and your other comments that I've cited here today?
Senator Barrett.
Senator, again, live issues on policy, I cannot comment.
You do not recant.
Judicial
Thank you.
Mr. Tung, you just said that you're originalist and a textualist. So let me ask you, the Emoluments Clause provides that no person holding public office shall accept any present of any kind, whatever, from any king, prince, or foreign state. Do you believe the language in the Emoluments Clause that says any present of any kind, whatever, means any present of any kind, whatever?
Senator, you are quoting the text of the Emoluments Clause, and I cannot dispute with the text of the Emoluments Clause.
So it would apply to any present, including an airplane?
It would apply to the president, I believe, your Senator.
And I take it as an originalist, you would accept that the founders would have never subscribed to the idea that a president in their time could have accepted a multi-$100 million gift from a foreign state?
Senator, the premise of your question implicates live issues in the public and pursuant to the canons of judicial ethics.
Well, let me just ask you, would the founders have believed that if a president received 100 camels from a foreign state, that was an emolument?
Senator, it's difficult to answer that question in the
Is it, though, as an originalist? Isn't it pretty simple? You've got the clear language of the Constitution.
Senator, one has to look at the language, but also the history surrounding the Emoluments Clause in order to discern.
I am looking at the history. Let me move on to another question. As an originalist, do you believe that the Obergefell versus Hodges decision affirming constitutional right to same-sex marriage, was that wrongly decided?
Senator, Obergefell versus Hodges is binding precedent of the Supreme Court.
I'm aware of that. Do you believe it was wrongly decided?
Senator, as a circuit judge, I would be bound to follow
I understand that, but that's not responsive to my question. Had you been on the Court of Appeals prior to that decision, would you have decided the case that way?
Senator, prior to Obergefell versus Hodges, there was a prior Supreme Court case addressing the issue, and I would have followed that case.
Well, would you have reached the same conclusion as the Supreme Court in Obergefell?
Senator, I would have followed binding precedent.
You're not answering my question. Would you have reached the same conclusion?
Senator, the conclusions that the two precedents reached were potentially in conflict, and I would have to follow the precedent that...
So you can't tell us at this point whether you would have reached the same conclusion as the Supreme Court in Obergefell. So let me ask you about the Supreme Court's decision in Lawrence affirming a constitutional right to be intimate among same-sex couples. Do you believe that was wrongly decided?
Senator, Lawrence versus Texas is a binding precedent of the Supreme
Again,
Court.
I'm aware of
and I would be
that, but I'm
bound by
asking
that
you whether
precedent.
you believe that was rightly decided or wrongly decided.
Senator, you're asking about my personal views.
No, I'm
and as a
asking you about your
nominee-
legal views. I'm asking about your legal views. Let me ask you about another case. Do you believe that Loving versus Virginia, which affirmed an interracial couple's right to marry, was that wrongly decided?
Senator, my wife and I are an interracial couple, and so if that case were wrongly decided, I would be in big trouble.
Okay, so you do agree with the reasoning of that case, and you're willing to say that. I appreciate that. But you're unwilling to say that you agree that Obergefell and Lawrence were correctly decided. Why is that?
Senator, again, those decisions are binding precedent of the Supreme Court, and I would be
No,
bound
I'm
to
aware of
follow.
that. So is Loving. And you're willing to tell us that you believe Loving was correctly decided, but you're not willing to say the other decisions were correctly decided. That seems less originalist and more situational. Let me ask you this about your role in the brief in Moore versus Harper. This was a case involving the discredited independent state legislature theory, which would allow a state legislature, even in the absence of a governor's signature, to effectively overturn an election. Do you believe that the Supreme Court wrongly decided Moore v. Harper when it rejected your view?
Senator, again, Moore v. Harper is binding precedent of the Supreme Court. and
Yeah, no,
although-
I get that, but you're still not answering my question. So let me ask you a different way. If a state legislature decided after an election to pass a bill, even in the absence of a governor signing it, to throw out absentee ballots that were mailed prior to the election but arrived after the election, would it be your view that a state Supreme Court or federal court would have to allow the legislature to overturn the election, would be powerless to correct that effort to overturn a free and fair election?
Senator, Moore versus Harper states that state courts can review what the state legislatures have passed as a matter of the Constitution.
No, I'm aware of that. And my concern, though, is that your unwillingness to embrace the reasoning of these decisions means that where there is room, and there is room in all of these decisions, and most particularly Moore v. Harper, for you as a court of appeals judge to narrow these decisions, it sounds like you'll take that opportunity to narrow those rights. And in the case of Moore, which I agree with Judge Ledick, the most important case to our democracy in a century, narrowing that decision means empowering state legislatures to overturn election results, and I cannot imagine a more dangerous idea on the bench. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Tung, you were asked about some of the things you said back in college. And one of the things that you were asked about was a statement you made in 2004. I believe that women are simply better than men at some things. Did you say that?
I did say that, Your Honor, Senator.
You said that you believe that women are better at some things, right?
That's right, Senator.
You didn't say women are worse at some things, did you?
I did not say that, Senator.
Just want to be sure I understand. How is that denigrating women?
It was not denigrating women, and I did not intend it to be so, Senator.
Yeah. I mean, you said they're better at some things. If you said they were worse at some things, you would be denigrating women, wouldn't you?
I would, Senator.
I don't know if I asked you this, but you didn't say they could do things worse. You said better, right? Just want to be sure I understand.
That's right, Senator.
Does government have free speech rights?
Government does have free speech rights.
How so? The First Amendment doesn't mention government, except to the extent that government, it is there to protect, for government, for us to have protection against government restricting our speech. How can government have free speech?
Senator, you are right to the extent that the First Amendment refers to Congress. Congress shall not make any law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. But there is a government speech doctrine that allows the government to convey a political message it wishes to, and the government is not committed to a policy of neutrality at all times.
Have you ever been to Boston?
I have been to Boston.
Okay. You seen the Boston City Hall?
I believe I have, Senator.
There's a plaza in front, and there's some flagpoles. And Boston, when different groups are having protests or demonstrations or rallies on the plaza, allows those groups to fly their flag. Someone wanted to fly a Christian flag, and the city of Boston said no. And the Supreme Court and the city of Boston said, that's our choice. That's government speech. We don't want to fly a Christian flag. So how come the Supreme Court said that they had to fly the Christian flag if government has free speech?
Senator, if the government opens up its plaza to all comers, so to speak, then it's restricted under the public forum doctrine in terms of what viewpoints it would decide to favor or not.
That's not necessarily so, is it, Counselor? I mean, let's suppose Texas, this actually happened. Someone in Texas lets people buy specialty license plates. You know, I love little warm puppies and stuff like that. You can buy a specialty license plate. And somebody wanted to have a specialty license plate that pictured the Confederate flag. And Texas said no. And the Supreme Court said Texas doesn't have to do it, government speech. So isn't that inconsistent with what you just said?
Senator, it is not inconsistent. This area of law is extremely complicated when something qualifies as a public forum such that viewpoint discrimination might not be allowed versus a public benefit and public conditions that the government can rightly impose on others, on its recipients. Then that shades into government speech, in which case the government would have more control over what kind of speech gets projected into the public square. But there is potential for tension there between the two doctrines that you raised, Senator.
The chairman's going to gavel me to shut up in a second. I just want to be sure I understand. Back at Yale, you said there are some things that women are better at, right?
Yes, Senator.
Not worse.
That's right.
Better.
Yes, Senator.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.